What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so getting into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, this is basically Guardians Disassembled. And this isn't really like a dissolution of the Guardians so much as it's really more of adding a few numbers to their ranks. Now, really the most notable addition to the Guardians at this point, at the immediate outset, is really like Agent Venom, Flash Thompson. And of course, we'll talk about that here in a minute. But the idea here is that this is, again, kind of Bendis tying into a lot of the plot threads that were basically put on hold because of the events of Infinity. And so, again, this is really kind of a good, not really a good jumping off point, but a really good point to kind of wind back into the events post introduction of Angela. But again, it's really the idea that Jason of Spartax is still hot on the heels of his son, Peter Quill, as well as the Guardians. Now, of course, some of this is due to the fact that the Guardians had basically staved off an attack by Jason of Spartax, but the other half of this is that Jason, in a lot of ways, is just a brutal guy. He's a guy that's really one of these individuals, who kind of wants to have the universe or have the galaxy under his thumb. Now, the funny thing is that what initially started out as, a team up more or less, or kind of like a galactic council between himself and the Shi'ar and the Kree and so on and so forth, eventually led to him basically speaking to them like underlings. And so it was almost as though he viewed himself as ruler of the galaxy before he had actually been elevated to that point. And so we'll actually find out this is effectively going to work against him. He essentially leapt before he could, figure out what was going on. And so because of this, with regards to the Guardians being attacked by, I guess really, Rocket and Star-Lord being attacked by Jason of Spartax, we again have Maxilin coming after Gamora. Of course, again, Maxilin was the guy we had talked about in our first Guardians video, who was just one of the bounty hunters that had been sent after the Guardians for the purpose of tracking down Gamora and bringing her to a particular group. Now, again, Gamora is basically captured simply because of the fact that Maxilin had learned from his last conflict with her that in truth, when they had first initially fought, he had actually underestimated what she was capable of and how powerful she was in terms of just her combat prowess and various skills and abilities and so on and so forth. So, of course, where she's taken captive, we basically end up switching over to Drax the Destroyer. Now, with regards to why it is that Flash Thompson's here, we'll actually cover this next week when we do the Superior Venom storyline. But effectively, this just came out of Superior Spider-Man in the sense that that Dr. Octopus as Peter Parker came into conflict with Flash Thompson as Agent Venom, which of course eventually led to Superior Spider-Man gaining the Venom symbiote. But of course, once the story came to a conclusion, Flash Thompson got it back and then was more or less kind of made an Avenger, not officially, but only in so much that he was basically sent alongside the Guardians out into space. Now, again, with regards to being paired up with Drax the Destroyer, the first idea here and what Bendis really begins to do is lay the seeds for the Planet Symbiote story, which is to say the story that will give us the origin of the Venom symbiote and the story where all the members of the Guardians of the Galaxy become Venom. So it's actually really, really cool. But of course, again, this is Bendis really kind of harping on the idea that people from Earth just don't understand how big the universe is, how big the galaxy is, and all the things that exist out there. And so with Drax showing up alongside Agent Venom, immediately, the local bartender, like this, this local guy named Krakow is like, get that guy out of here, get him and what he's wearing out of here. So the initial indication is that this guy knows what the Venom symbiote is. He knows what the Venom symbiote's about. Now, this is going to be kind of an important theme coming back later on because Flash Thompson will actually come back to this guy later. But of course, he's basically given different arms and armament simply because of the fact that from the perspective of Drax, the Venom symbiote won't be enough. And again, that's very true when it comes to the various weapons and the various enemies that are out there in the galaxy, simply because of the fact that on Earth, the Venom symbiote is very, very dangerous. But because of the fact that so many people know what the Venom symbiote is and so many people are able to combat it, a lot of enemies out there know how to deal with it accordingly. And so Flash really needs to have various tools at his disposal that will allow him to overcome different threats. Now, all of this really seems to be a moot point simply because of the fact that a handful of soldiers come out of nowhere, snatch up Drax the Destroyer, and then just take off. And so what we end up doing is we actually end up jumping to all these different places where the members of the Guardians were taken. The first one is Peter Quill, who of course has been taken personally by Jason. Now, the funny thing about this is Jason effectively went through and said, kill whoever you have to kill, but get my son. Now, initially it was captivity. It was taking Peter hostage. It was holding him in confines and trying to find a way to reason with his son and say, look, this road that you're on of basically being a space cowboy is not effective. You are going to be the next leader of Spartax, Spartax, you have to step into the role of what it means to be a king. The issue with this is that Peter looks at his father and says, if you're what it means to be the president or the ruler of Spartax, you're not fit to be a ruler because you're effectively evil. You're a guy that wants to keep the world under your thumb. You are not a person that I want to follow behind. In truth, he very much wants to be the opposite of his father. And so where the two seem, effectively irreconcilable, what ends up happening is Jason basically makes this throwaway comment that where you are here, no one knows where you're at and no one's coming to save you, which switches over to the idea that Carol Danvers is coming to find him. Now, in truth, Carol Danvers is aware of what it was that happened to Peter Quill, but this actually came by way of Marvel Now, with Kelly Sue DeConnick taking over the Carol Danvers, or I guess the Captain Marvel line of stories. The reason why this matters is because of the fact that with regards to Kelly Sue DeConnick's run of Captain Marvel, initially the goal was to basically remove Carol Danvers from Earth, because despite all the things that she'd done and her role as basically being Miss Marvel, eventually adopting the mantle of Captain Marvel, the idea was to give her a more prominent role, to basically just kind of throw things at the wall and see what stuck. And by removing her from the planet Earth, it basically returned her to the roots of the Captain Marvel role as it was originally held by Marvel of the Kree. And so the idea was to basically say, hey, look, here's who she used to be, but she's Captain Marvel now. She's going to play a more cosmic role than she did before. So again, the most reasonable case to make this, or to really present this scenario with Carol Danvers, is to throw her on Guardians of the Galaxy, simply because by the time this story took place, the movie was already on, there's already a lot of hype for the movie, coming out and so on and so forth, being out. And so it was a great jumping point to basically introduce fans to what this new Carol Danvers was going to be, because there was so much excitement around buying the new Guardians of the Galaxy story. Now, with regards to Rocket Raccoon, he's basically taken by the Kree, and the Kree are really just kind of experimenting on him at the behest of the Supreme Intelligence, and that's effectively what's been happening here. All these different members of the Galactic Council have basically been given one member of the Guardian of the Galaxy, just because of the fact that in their eyes, they all have their own different motivations. For example, with the Brotherhood of the Badoon, they were effectively attacked and almost pushed to the brink of extinction by Thanos. And so their question is, where is Thanos? Give us Thanos. We want his location. Of course, the best person to gain this information from is Gamora. And so they effectively subject her to a series of endless battles, hoping to wear her down to the point that she can't fight anymore. When it comes to Drax the Destroyer, he's taken by the Shi'ar. And so time and time again, it's basically this idea that somewhere along the line, these different members of the Guardians came into conflict with these members of the Galactic Council. And these members of the Galactic Council basically get their own personal revenge against the individuals, the members of the Guardians, that specifically harmed them. Now, jumping back to Flash Thompson to Agent Venom, remember, he's still pretty new to the Avengers roster. He's new to what they're capable of. He's new to what it is that they're able to pull off. And so while he's trying to basically figure out where it is that Drax the Destroyer has been taken, trying to figure out, anybody that can basically help him, he suddenly comes across Captain Britain and Valkyrie and, Hawkeye and Black Widow and Beast, members of the Avengers. And of course, they play on this. They play on this idea that, hey man, you got to come with us. See, what had happened was there was like this giant civil war back on Earth between the X-Men. You got to come back. You got to help us get everything sorted out. And so on the surface, it seems like a rescue mission. And the way they pass it off actually works really, really well. I mean, they basically say, hey, look, like you're a human being in nowhere, in this massive bar out in the middle of space. It was only a matter of time before you drew the attention. All we had to do was just kind of show up here and wait for people to start talking about how there's a human and a person with a Venom symbiote walking around this place. But then, of course, we basically end up having the Venom symbiote react violently to a threat the way it normally does, only for us to realize these are not the Avengers. Instead, they're basically Skrulls posing as the Avengers for the purpose of taking down Flash Thompson. And so where each of these members of the Guardians seem almost completely and totally, incapacitated and effectively taken out, of course, Peter Quill is able to basically engineer his escape, or at least it seems like he's able to make his getaway. Now, of course, this is only really evident on the surface in the sense that he's taken prisoner by the Skrulls, alongside, again, Drax the Destroyer, who's being held captive by the Shi'ar, Gamora, who's being forced to fight in these endless battles against the Badoon. But then suddenly we have the return of Angela. Now, with regards to Angela's character, again, during the events of Infinity, she had basically just kind of been spacefaring. She had left the planet Earth during the whole event. Of course, all that was basically written to redesign her character and maintain interest among fans in terms of Angela as a concept. Of course, again, as we know, it wasn't the most popular thing to have ever graced Marvel Comics, but the fact remains here that this is basically Bendis, telling us that in terms of the relationship between Gamora and Angela, there's still very much a partnership, if anything, in the sense that they still view themselves as warriors, and as warriors, they will usually always be there for one another whenever the time calls for help in such a fashion. Now, again, at the same time as Peter Quill basically makes his escape from Spartax, we basically have Carol Danvers that flies in to rescue him and that kind of thing. So again, it's really Agent Venom Venom and it's Carol Danvers who are effectively being added to the ranks of the Guardians. But of course, being confronted by his father, what happens is Peter Quill, of course, without his father really, without his father realizing what's going on, effectively forces him to admit that he had called down for the assassination of his own son, simply because of the fact that Peter refused to fall in line with the traditional role that was assigned to him as a future leader of Spartax. And so this information, as it's basically being broadcast out to everybody who's watching it, in the sense that Peter says, look, you call us criminals, but we're individuals standing up for the greater good. We're individuals standing up for people that can't help themselves. What does that make you for trying to kill us, torture us, that kind of thing? For doing that, what it does is it broadcasts out to the Supreme Intelligence and various other members of the Galactic Council who essentially turn their backs on Jason and Spartax. At the same time, the citizenry of Spartax, who had no idea what was going on, basically call for the death of Jason. And so essentially, he's ousted from his own kingdom. He's forced out of his own rule and forced out of his own land. And so what ends up happening here is that where Flash Thompson and Venom were effectively separated from one another in order to allow them to basically maintain control, in order for the Skrulls to essentially test the Venom symbiote and see what's going on. Again, it's this idea that there are various races out there that know what the Venom symbiote is about. And where one of the Skrulls tries to put on the symbiote, it effectively kills them. Now, again, this really kind of taps into the idea of how Agent Venom was being written at the time, in the sense that the Venom symbiote had no real communication with Flash, which is to say, we didn't see with the Venom symbiote the kind of thing that we saw in Marvel Now 2.0 with Lee Price, in the sense that the Venom symbiote was talking to Lee and Lee was talking to the symbiote. Instead, it was really more of like a psychic bond, so to speak, that existed between Flash Thompson and the symbiote, where Flash basically had this kind of empathic link where he could understand what the symbiote wanted, what its motivations were, that kind of thing. And so, of course, because of the fact that this Skrull is not deemed a suitable host, the symbiote basically kills him, in the sense that the Skrull simply says, I can't control it. Now, again, it's basically Bendis telling us that Flash Thompson was able to control it, again, kind of hearkening to this measure of communication. And where Flash redawns the symbiote, the idea is to basically go on a conquest to save the other members of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And so again, Peter Quill, Carol Danvers, they're able to make their escape. Jason's effectively ousted. Angela ends up saving Gamora. It's kind of a cool concept to see these various characters coming back together again, finding Groot, bringing him back into the fold. But then the question becomes, what happens with Venom? What happens with the Agent Venom character? And so what this is going to do is it's actually going to lead directly into the next story, which is Planet Symbiote, the story that effectively picks up with this idea that the Venom symbiote itself is sentient, that the Venom symbiote itself does have motivation and it does have drive, and it's very much going to lay the foundation and the groundwork for what we'll actually see in the Venom story from All New, All Different Marvel and Marvel Now. Of course, that story that we've covered already. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.